Greetings to all who are assembled at this moment. This candidate forum for the DC Council at Large seats is being recorded, and it will be posted on YouTube perhaps before the end of the weekend. I'm not quite positive, but you'll get notice of it. Your respective listservs, how you were notified of this forum. And now we're 8 for 8. We have all 8 of our panelists here for now. My name is Mark Pattison. I'm the past president of the Shepherd Park Citizens Association, one of 3 co-sponsors, along with the Chevy Chase Citizens Association and Advisory Neighborhood Commission 3G/4. The chair of the ANC, Randy Speck, is our timekeeper and gatekeeper, and he is represented by that device. It's going to be our stopwatch for today, because you'll probably have 60-second stops to answer the questions that are posed here, so you can get enough questions in to make it a worthwhile hour.
Off camera now.
That's fine. And I'm going to pass this over to my co-moderator, Robert Gordon, the president of the Chevy Chase Citizens Association. Take it away, sir.
Thank you very much. I am the current president of Chevy Chase Citizens Association. I have been a ANC commissioner and chair of the Chevy Chase ANC. And indeed, many years ago, I ran unsuccessfully for city council. So I've seen this process inside and out. And I welcome you all. I'm glad that you are all here at this moment. We are going to attempt to ask questions and have the flow of things done on an alphabetical order. It was the only fair way we could do it. So just to introduce all of the people that are here, we have with us Marcus Goodwin, Christina Henderson, Ed Lazier, Jean Lewis, Vincent Orange, Monica Palacio, Robert White, and Ann Wilcox. And what we're going to do is start out with, in that order, and I'll announce it again as we go. I'm going to ask each one of you in about a minute to make an introductory statement. Tell us what you're about and your normal elevator pitch. So we'll start with Marcus Goodwin, and please be cognizant of the time. So,
thank you so much for inviting us this evening. My name is Marcus Goodwin. I am now a Shepherd Park homeowner, and I'm running for DC Council at Large because I'm uniquely qualified to be a bold, transformational leader who will put people over politics, keep us safe during this pandemic, and ensure that Washington is stronger and more equitable coming out of it. I'm a DC native. I'm the 5th of 8 children from Columbia Heights. I know the power of government because I've seen it in my personal life. I know that we are at a critical moment right now. We need to guide the district to a public health and economic recovery that isn't just a return to normal, but one that's going to build us forward stronger. We also need to close our racial wealth gap by making equitable investments in education, housing, healthcare, and economic development. I'm happy to be talking to this group in particular because I want to serve and deal with specific issues to the Shepherd Park and Chevy Chase communities. I look forward to the conversations.
thank you very much. We'll now move to Christina Henderson.
Thanks, Robert, and thank you all for who put this together. My name is Christina Henderson. I'm the daughter of an Army veteran and a retired New York City bus driver. My parents always instilled in my siblings and I the value of hard work, collective action, and fighting for what you believe in, and that's what I've done for my entire career. I worked on political campaigns to help get some good people elected to office. I worked for a couple of school systems, including DC Public Schools. I've advised and worked with United States senators. And for 5 years, I had the pleasure and honor of serving residents in the district, first at DCPS and then for 4 years at the DC Council. I was Councilmember David Grosso's first legislative director. And then when he became chair of the Committee on Education, I served as the committee director for 2 years before leaving for my current work. The thread throughout my entire career has been about how do you help working families and children succeed, because I truly believe that one zip code should not be a barrier to your opportunity for success. And unfortunately in DC, that's not the case, and that's why I'm running. I'm running because I believe we need a more equitable DC, and we need more council members who are focused in on policies that are going to make DC more equitable and sustainable for us all. Looking forward to the conversation today, and thanks again for the invitation.
Well, thank you for that. The next candidate is Ed Lazier. Ed, please. I think you're muted.
Can we start over again? Sorry. I didn't.
That's okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, we'll set it back.
my bad. All right, well, I'll just go ahead and jump in. Well, thank you all for having me tonight. My name is Ed Lazier, and I'm excited to be running for DC Council. I've been in the district my entire adult life, most of that in Brookland, where my wife and I raised 2 sons through DC public schools. I spent the last 2 decades running the DC Fiscal Policy Institute, where for economic and racial justice. At DCFPI, I worked to master the DC budget and then partnered with advocates and residents throughout the city to fight for things like affordable housing, school equity, paid family leave, raising the minimum wage, and more. And I'm running because I'm deeply troubled that our prosperity has come at the expense of rising homelessness, wider school inequities, displacement of Black residents, and more. I'm running to put economic and racial justice at the heart of the city's agenda and to tackle the city's biggest challenges at the scale they demand, things that I always fought for and the vision I always had as an advocate. I'm a progressive candidate and have already been endorsed by Attorney General Cara Racine, Councilmember Brianne Nadeau, a host of environmental, social justice, and labor organizations, and I'm excited to have your vote as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Vincent Orange.
Well, good evening to all.
Sorry, I think that you skipped me.
Oh, I beg your pardon. You're right.
Thank you.
I somehow got it out of order. Is it Jean or Jeanne?
Janae.
Janae.
Yep.
Janae Lewis.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. My name is Janae Lewis, and I'm also running for DC City Council at large as an independent. I'm originally from the DC area. My mom was a DC public school teacher. My dad worked for Amtrak, and I went to Georgetown Visitation High School, not too far from Chevy Chase. I went away to college and lived all over the country for 12 years, leading social justice work. And when I came back in 2010, I was directing a program working with US Congress on the connection between racism and policy. And it was very clear that much of what we were talking about around the country was also evident in Washington, DC, and it concerned me. And what concerned me more was that folks in DC felt upset about it, but didn't feel empowered to make a difference. So our campaign talked to folks about vision in all 8 wards before we launched, and it informed our platform focused on equitable development, especially for small businesses, excellent schools for every single student in the district, and sustainable housing throughout the city. And in light of this crisis, our campaign is focused on helping folks retain that vision without losing sight of responding to the crisis. So I look forward to our conversation this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So next speaker is Vincent Orange.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Vincent Orange. I'm an attorney and a certified public accountant, a former Ward 5 council member, at-large council member, and served as a Democratic National Committee man. I'm running to provide mature, experienced leadership, institutional knowledge, and sound judgment to plan and execute the successful comeback of the District of Columbia for the benefit and general welfare of its citizens. Clearly, we have to define the new normal in DC caused by coronavirus, civil unrest, and a severely damaged DC economy. We must jumpstart this economy, get our businesses back to generating the $8.5 billion in revenue that the city so desperately needs, so we can address some of the issues. I am the one that got and achieved the $15 per hour minimum wage, 5 days of sick leave pay for our tip wage workers, and legislation for a wage step. So I'm happy to be here and looking forward to DC coming back better.
Thank you very much. Up now is Monica Palacio.
Hi, everyone. Hello, Chevy Chase residents. It's great to be with you today. My name is Monica Palacio. I'm a civil rights lawyer, an advocate, a mom, and a government leader. I've been in the district 30 years. Most recently, I served as a director of the Office of Human Rights under Mayor Vincent Gray and then under Mayor Bowser. I ran that agency over 6 years. It doubled in size because the work the city needed in terms of protecting citizens from discrimination, protecting residents from hate crime, and the work of making sure that government services were reaching every resident that needed them grew over the last 10 years. So under my leadership, I was able to be responsive across the entire city with all of our most vulnerable communities, faith minority communities, LGBTQ communities, marginalized low-income families, immigrants, and many more. I believe this election is about saving lives and protecting families, and I'm prepared to fight for the investments we need in housing, public safety, and education.
Thank you very much. Next up is Robert White.
Good evening, and thanks so much for having me. I'm at-large council member Robert White. I'm a fifth-generation Washingtonian, a husband, father of 2 little girls. And my experience here is somewhat unique. I'm a lawyer by training, but my life is vastly different than the rest of my family's. I cut my teeth as a young lawyer on Capitol Hill working for Congresswoman Norton as her legislative counsel. But as I worked on the issues that impacted our city, I noticed that my family, high school and junior high school hourly workers, were falling further and further behind. So I jumped into local politics because I believe it was there that I could make the biggest difference. Since I've been on the council, I've been aggressive, and I've led both locally and nationally on issues like early childhood education and expanding voting rights. I have the support of most of our major labor unions of GLAA and the Sierra Club, because folks know that since I've been on the council, I've stepped up and I've worked hard every day to get things done and to stay in touch with residents. And that's what I want to continue to do. So I ask for your vote on November 3rd.
Thank you very much. Ann Wilcox, we'll hear from you.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Ann Wilcox, and I believe I'm the 3rd Shepherd Park resident that's on just among this group of candidates. So among 25 candidates, there is a lot of duplication. I live on Alaska Avenue, only for about the last 3 years. Generally, I've lived in, Columbia Heights and other parts of DC, but I am a lawyer. I went to American University Law School in the 1980s after I came to DC, sort of on the college intern circuit. Graduated from AU, and I've always done progressive or public interest law, such as landlord-tenant, and also work with protesters quite a bit, those people that you love to see outside of your homes and offices. I also was elected school board member from 94 to 98. That was just before the control board came into being, and I obviously learned a lot about our education system. I was also appointed to the Commission for Women by Mayor Sharon Kelly back in the early 90s. Most importantly, I represent the Statehood Green Party. We are a progressive party. We've been around since the 1980s. I was actually a statehood party member before we became the Statehood Greens. And we have a broad progressive agenda calling for affordable housing, labor rights, youth equity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next phase of this is we've prepared a good number of questions solicited from neighbors who wrote to us, and we've selected those that we thought were most suitable for this format and would best answer questions that people in this neighborhood need to have answered. So I'm going to work backwards this time alphabetically. So Ann, you'll have another shot. The first question is, and every candidate will have an opportunity to answer these questions in turn. Ann Wilcox, if elected, what committees would you like to chair or be assigned to, and what expertise do you bring for that committee?
Thank you. That's a great question. I think the most important question facing our city is the issue of development. Who decides what is to be developed? Where does the money come from? And what are the outcomes? Obviously, affordable housing is the top of the list. We need to make sure that housing is preserved and more affordable housing is created. But I think in the Housing Committee or in the I guess it's Business Development Committee that would govern development, those are the most important issues. For the Statehood Green Party, we look at places like McMillan Park. Could that be retained as a park space, as more than 50% park, if not more? And we would like to see the deeply affordable housing built there, and the less burden on traffic and so forth. So I would want to work on development issues. I think that's the most important issue facing us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, same question. Robert White, if elected, what committees would you like to chair or be assigned to, and what expertise do you bring for that committee?
Thank you. I currently chair the Committee on Facilities and Procurement. For many years as legislative counsel to Congresswoman Norton on Capitol Hill, I was the lead staffer on Department of General Services, or rather GSA issues. And so government construction and leasing is a place where I have policy expertise. But I also sit on and want to continue to sit on the Education Committee, because the proficiency rates for children of color in our public schools show that something is not working. And yet our education officials continue telling us that we're doing exactly the right thing. And I know for a fact that we are not. I will continue to insist that we are not. I want to continue to sit on the Housing Committee, because we are in a tragic state with regard to housing affordability, and we need bold and progressive ideas. We need people who will push the envelope and think outside the box. That's what I've done. I've pushed the idea of converting outdated office buildings into affordable housing, an idea that I think will mature as we see the very unfortunate retail and commercial loss resulting from COVID-19, but still suffer from a housing crisis.
Thank you. Monica Palacio, same question. You remember it?
Yes, I do. What committees would I like to chair or lead on? And my first choice is public safety and justice. So my agency for the majority of my time in the government sat under that committee under Chairman McDuffie, Chairman Allen, and then Chairman Todd. And I'm very familiar with the experience I bring is 5 years of working on public safety issues with the National Crime Prevention Council. I traveled the country and worked in the DMV, making sure that residents most affected by crime felt safe dialing 911 and calling for help and rebuilding trust with their law enforcement agencies. I also bring the experience of being in the government and running the Office of Human Rights, which for the most part sat under that committee. And I think that the issues of racial justice and making sure that Black and brown residents are safe, in fact, at the hands of their government is a central issue for the healing and rebuilding of our city.
Thank you. Vincent Orange.
Yes, thank you.
Same question.
I would like to chair the Committee on Finance and Revenue. I'm an attorney and a certified public accountant with a Master of Laws in Taxation from Georgetown. I had the opportunity to serve as the Chief Financial Officer of the National Children's Center Incorporated, and I also was with the public accounting firm Arthur Anderson Company. The Finance and Revenue Committee is critical. The city right now is really on the verge of bankruptcy. Our rainy day fund was nearly $2 billion, and the mayor had to use it to balance this year and fiscal year 2021. We're down to $149 million in our rainy day fund. Our unemployment compensation fund had $600 million. We're now down to less than $200 million. If we have to borrow from the US Treasury, the control board comes back. And so I had the experience of working with Mayor Williams and Chairperson Linda Kropp when we had the $518 million deficit, the control board, junk bond status, and we were given the prescription from Congress, balance your budget for 4 consecutive cycles, and then the control board goes away. We put together a plan called the Economic Resurgence of Washington, D.C., Citizens Plan for Prosperity, and that's what brings us to where we are today and has gotten us through all
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask a quick follow-up question. Would you, the committee you're talking about is a very responsible one. Will you hold a job outside of this position?
No, in fact, I've introduced legislation while I was on the council to ban outside employment, and that's also part of my platform this time around, to ban outside employment and also to institute term limits.
Good, thank you. Next up is Janae Lewis.
Thank you. So if elected, I would like to chair the Committee on Government Operations. My experience, again, most of my career has been in nonprofit organizations across the country, and my expertise is in working with people across demographics, racial, ethnic groups, LGBTQ populations, immigrant groups, to work together around shared interests and shared goals. And that's what we need right now in light of our city's crisis. We certainly have a fiscal crisis. We certainly have an education crisis. But if we're really going to reimagine public safety, if we're really going to work together as a city and as a community to pull ourselves through this crisis and reinvent a new vision for DC where everyone can thrive and call this home, we need to deeply engage communities across the city to do that. And we need to empower them to be able to take part in the conversation in a robust way. In DC, I've volunteered on several boards, national and local. I've organized interfaith work across the city. And again, in my current position as vice president of a national nonprofit, I work with organizations and people across demographics to make those kinds of solutions happen.
Thank you. Ed Lazier.
Yeah, I would love to chair the Committee on Education because we know that education is so critical to creating opportunity and addressing the city's inequities, and yet we are doing such a horrible job at that. I'm deeply bothered by the wide racial inequities in school achievement and was shocked and angered in the last year when the city actually cut funding for a number of schools in Ward 7 and Ward 8. Clearly that is not a path to equity. I want to start by investing in our youngest children, infants and toddlers. I was part of a coalition that helped pass the Birth to 3 legislation in 2018 to help families with young children, and it still needs to be implemented and funded, so I'd love to fight for that. I also want to focus on DC public schools a lot. I chaired an education finance commission 10 years ago where we commissioned or called for the city to commission a study on funding schools adequately and equitably, and 8 years later, we still haven't done that. So I would want to finish the work that I started on that commission by making sure that we create an adequate budget for every single school in the city, but also have a school budget that so that we can have school-based mental health services, smaller class sizes, tutoring, all the things that we know create opportunity for our lowest income students of color.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Christina Henderson.
Thank you for that. So obviously I would want to serve on the Committee on Education. I served as the committee director for 2 years. And in the 4 years that I worked on the council, had a part in, advancing over 40 different pieces of legislation, a lot of that on education, DCPS school facilities, access to EpiPens in schools, moving legislation to ensure that all public schools have a nurse full time. And obviously there's a lot of unfinished business in terms of all of those pieces there. But I'm also interested in serving on the Committee on Transportation and the Environment. As I said, my dad is a New York City bus driver, a retired New York City bus driver, and he did that work for 29 years. And I think that public transportation is incredibly important in the city, especially when we talk about equity issues, particularly in wards, parts of 4, 5, and 7, and 8, where we have our most transit-dependent residents, but don't have a lot of connectivity in terms of bus transit. We spend a lot of time in the city talking about train, but we haven't spent a lot of time on bus. And I feel like if public transportation, particularly for our more essential workers, were reliable, more people would use it, and that would certainly advance our Vision Zero goals. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally on this question, Marcus Goodwin.
Thank you so much. I'm the only candidate who's worked on building and financing affordable housing here in the district, as well as commercial properties. So naturally, the Committee on Housing and Neighborhood Revitalization would be a good fit for me because I bring that experience that no one else does. I want to be able to enable more middle and low income residents to become homeowners by expanding our home purchase assistance program, ensuring that the production of more workforce housing happens through our Housing Production Trust Fund as well. Finally, I want to see that our seniors who've lived in DC for decades are able to remain in their homes and age in place gracefully. Another committee that I'd like to work on is education. I was raised attending my neighborhood school in the District of Columbia. My mother's a teacher at Lafayette Elementary, and I want to be able to raise children who attend schools that are well-resourced, that have staff, teachers, but also all of the outside of school needs, such as before and after school programs that will ensure that it's an enriching and nurturing environment.
Thank you. So before I throw the next question over to Mark, I have one follow-on question, and I'm going to start this with Marcus Goodwin. What will you do to respond to COVID-19 moving forward? what ideas do you have to promote the DC economy and especially small businesses?
Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Great. I know that right now we are in critical need of revitalization for our small and local business owners. I like that the district and the council has passed a $100 million relief bill that will ensure that a lot of our small local business operators get grant funding they need. But we need to continue to look at creative ideas such as the streeteries that were brought up in the district so that we can provide grant and loan funding to keep our small and local business owners afloat. I'm a small and local business owner as a partner in a restaurant in the district. So I know and understand what it means to be an employer, to suffer through COVID-19, and working collaboratively with the district to find a better way for us to have rules and regulations that allow them to come back better than before. So I think it's the grant and loan funding through our Finance and Revenue Committee and balancing that priority in our budget.
Do you have any specific ideas with respect to that?
Yeah, one would be having a small local business owner tax increment financing program. Whereas right now we provide tax increment financing for people to build large scale developments. I'd like it for our small local business owners to be able to take out loan funding so that they can invest in their businesses. So it would be these micro grants that are structured similar to tax increment financing that's based upon the increase in tax revenue that the investment they're making will generate for the district.
Thank you. So, Christina, what will you do to respond to COVID-19 moving forward? What ideas do you have to promote the DC economy and especially small businesses?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Robert. I honestly think that we need to double down in terms of our micro grant program, but also I would love to see the council explore doing their own local version of the Paycheck Protection Program. I think we're going to need to provide a lot of support for our small businesses to get to our next phase of opening. In particular, you know, we have focused a lot in terms of the hospitality industry, restaurants, and those kinds of things. But the other businesses that I'm super concerned around are like our neighborhood cleaners, where no one has, you know, been taking suits and things like that. How are they holding on, and how are they going to be able to manage through this process? But also some of our nightlife businesses, particularly those who are live concert music venues, who are not going to be able to operate with over 250 people until we have a vaccine. And so I feel like a local PPP program would add a lifeline to those businesses to help them stay afloat until we get to a full vaccine.
Thank you. Ed Lazier, same question, but more of a focus on the pursuing solutions to COVID-19, that is more PPE, testing, so on and so forth.
If it's okay, I'd really prefer to answer the other question because I really think
Answer the other question.
Yeah. So, because for me, the thing that really is deeply, deeply troubling me and worrying me is the huge wave of evictions that could come as early as the end of this year or early next year when our eviction moratorium ends and all the back rent that people have not been able to pay because their job disappeared on them will be due. I think it would be a moral failure and a public policy failure, a communal failure if we as a city let even one DC resident lose their home because their job disappeared around them through no fault of their own. So I think we need to go further than what we've done and ban evictions for anybody who got behind in rent during the pandemic and pair that with a fund for landlords to help any landlord who would suffer severe hardship as a result. I also don't want to lose any small businesses, including those in my neighborhood of Brookland, but anywhere in the city. And I think similarly, we need to support them. I would also ban evictions for small businesses and so that they could negotiate with their landlords to help reduce whatever rent they owed and stay in their communities and stay in our communities.
Thank you. Janae Lewis, same question.
Yes, so small businesses have been a central part of our platform since the very beginning, and particularly small businesses owned and operated by DC residents. And so I think one piece is rent relief for small businesses. So similar to the rent relief that we're providing to individual tenants, we can provide the same type of relief to small business owners. And I think that we need to spend money to make money. So other cities have established mini bond programs. So instead of the municipal bonds that cities often sell to large investors, we can sell bonds to DC residents like myself whose income has not been affected by the pandemic, so that DC residents own the debt. And we can target the revenue from those mini bonds to small businesses, especially those that were left out of federal relief programs, until our economy recovers in the next 5 to 10 years, when the bondholders would be reimbursed for those bonds. So I think that the micro grants and other support that other candidates have mentioned are important, but we need to figure out a way to generate the revenue to pay for it without sacrificing other folks. And so as a council person, I would work to implement that program.
That's a very interesting idea. Vincent Orange, would you like me to reread the question?
No, I got it. Basically, the District of Columbia needs an immediate infusion of cash into our economy. And the best way to do that, since we're a $16 billion government, is to start spending more money with local businesses that are subject to DC taxation. Our dollar must circulate in DC. So for example, we have a $2 billion expendable budget. 50% of it has to be spent with our local businesses. Now I think all of it should be spent with our local businesses. We're gonna buy pencils, we're gonna buy pens, we're gonna buy toilet paper. Those are things that we can get locally and make sure that those dollars are subject to DC taxation. I would stop doing business with California and Michigan. They're not subject to DC taxation, and they are not gonna hire DC residents. So no one's gonna take care of us but us. We have the dollars, but we need to trap our dollars at the borders and make sure they are circulating in the District of Columbia. As it relates to COVID-19, we need PPE for everyone. People need to have their temperature checked, and it's not a big problem. You're used to getting your wand down when you go to sporting events, and checking your temperature is going to be a lot easier. So we need to come up with ways to get our economy up and going and the dollar circulating in the District of Columbia.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Monica Palacio.
Hi, thank you. This question has now gone in many directions. So I'll start with, I'd like to pursue, similar to Janae's suggestion, this idea of public-private partnership financing, where we, instead of increasing taxes and these taxes that have been proposed, do we tax the wealthy? I think we give residents who have more fixed income and who have the ability to invest in the district's recovery a chance to pay into these mini bonds as described. I also think that we need to provide rent relief for small businesses without sacrificing the ability to generate revenue for the city. We cannot keep spending if our revenue continues to decrease. So we have to balance those needs. I also agree that contact tracing and PPE and access to health care continue to be a challenge for Black and brown residents, low-income residents, immigrant residents who don't have the luxury of taking time off from work or sacrificing a paycheck to get health care. We have to bring more health care to them.
Good. Thank you very much. Robert White.
Thank you for that question. We have to use the purchasing power of the district government to secure PPE and testing for all businesses that need it. We also have to freeze commercial property taxes, prohibit evictions, including for commercial properties, through this public health pandemic, and extend it even beyond the mayor's declared public health emergency. We have to offer more flexibility for our local businesses. Some of them are trying to adapt through this process where traditional restaurants are acting as delis or carryouts during the day. We've allowed them to sell liquor where we previously didn't, allow them to use seating outdoors. We have to continue that. But the district will have to assist financially with assisting these businesses in operating outdoors. And finally, the most important thing, we have to spend our rainy day funds to support these businesses, because our economy destabilizes and hundreds and thousands of employees lose their jobs if these businesses close. So we have to use our rainy day fund for this rainy day.
I'd like to follow up with a technical question. That is, it seems like testing now is available, but the speed of the analysis is very slow. How will you resolve that problem?
We are going to have to work with our regional governments, and God willing, a new administration work with the federal government to do that, because there are two important factors. Speed is one, but accuracy is the other. So I don't want quick and wrong. I want quick and right. And that is something that no individual jurisdiction has the ability to control by itself. So we have to leverage partnerships, be it regional, which is what I have done as regional chair of the Council of Governments, or national.
Thank you. Ann Wilcox?
Yes, I agree with my fellow candidates that we obviously need to have more short-term loans and hopefully forgivable loans for small business. But I also think we need to forge ahead with the hospital that's being built east of the river. I'm sure the council member knows that it's been a tortured history, but we need better health services in all parts of the city. We need an obstetrics ward east of the river. These are critical services. And I'd also like to mention transportation. We need to be sure that Metro stays afloat. I noticed there's actually a new bus line that links the two neighborhoods that are on this call tonight, Chevy Chase and Shepherd Park. There's a little bus that's going to go around on Military Road, which is great. So we need to make sure that our bus services and Metro services are still around after many of us start going back to work. And, you know, without some short-term help or maybe some help from Congress, that's not a given. So thank you.
Well, at this stage, I'm going to throw the next questions over to my colleague, Mark Pattison.
Thank you, Robert. This will be another 1-minute answer. We'll go alphabetically, but starting with Ed Lazier. So if you're thinking on the run and formulating your responses, the order will be Ed, Janae, Vincent, Monica, Robert, Ann, Marcus, and Christina. And the question is, in the 2019 Housing Equity Report, the mayor has set a goal of 1,990 new dedicated affordable housing units in Ward 3 and the western part of Ward 4 by 2025. Do you agree with that goal? Why and why not? Ed, it's yours.
Yeah, I think the goal should be even more ambitious. I am really supportive, and I'm glad that the mayor has chosen to set affordable housing goals and require them to be in every part of the city. But we just need even more affordable housing, and particularly in Ward 3. You know, through my work at the DC Fiscal Policy Institute, I helped highlight that over the last 4 years, only 1% of the city's affordable housing, new affordable housing, was built in Ward 3, and almost all of that came as a result of inclusionary zoning. We just also know that the city, and every city, has a history of zoning and exclusion, racial and economic exclusion, that has contributed to the segregated housing patterns that we have. We know that housing can create opportunities for low-income families to find jobs, for kids to succeed in schools. And so we need 30,000 affordable housing units in the city. We need them soon. 2,000 in Ward 3 is not enough. I'd love to see even more, so that we have more affordable housing opportunities for low-income residents, but specifically in the parts of town where opportunities are the greatest.
Thank you, Ed. Janae, it's yours.
Yes, I agree that we need more affordable housing in all 8 wards throughout the city. And I do think that some of that housing needs to be built in Ward 3 and in Ward 4. And our campaign talks a lot about cooperative housing, and we are advancing mixed income models of cooperative housing, similar to co-ops in DC, but also in other cities like New York, because it's not only about creating affordable housing now, but providing pathways for people to build wealth over time. And so I would like to see affordable housing that's an entry point for mixed income cooperative housing. We know that in New York, Co-op City, which is one of the largest co-op communities, has created a stable block of affordable cooperative housing and has allowed families to build wealth over generations. And I think that while we need to address our housing crisis and make sure that people are housed immediately at affordable rates, people are also interested in building wealth for their families. And so we need to be creative about the design that we build for affordable housing throughout the city, including in wards 3 and 4.
Thank you, Janae. Vincent, your answer, please.
Yes, I certainly support more affordable housing being built throughout the District of Columbia. Although I do think we need to think outside the box. I think we should look at relaxing our height restrictions east of the river, not downtown, but we can build because we have great views, the same way that folks in Roslyn look into our city, they build up and they have great explosion of housing. We can have more housing east of the river if we relax the height restrictions, but we do not want to destroy the beauty of downtown in those areas. Also, I'm pushing that we build 1,000 units for seniors, those that only have minimum wage income, which is now $15 per hour, and first-time home buyers. I think those units can be 600 square feet, sold at $50,000, and built by local developers, so we can also have those dollars circulate in the District of Columbia as well.
Thank you, Vincent. Monica, your answer, please.
Yes, I think we absolutely have to invest first in the housing inventory that we have. So I'm concerned about the units that are currently affordable housing that are in disrepair, and those units being lost when the buildings can't be maintained or rent isn't paid, and somehow the building then is released into, the marketplace, and then becomes, an expensive set of apartment buildings that no one can live in. So I think we need to protect the affordable housing inventory we have. We need to proceed with the plan to build at least 2,000 new units in Ward 3 and Ward 4, but that's not enough. And I've heard from families that being placed in the middle of Ward 3 when there might not be transportation or a grocery store walking distance may not be a reasonable or suitable lifestyle change for them, may place them further away from their employment, from their child's school. So we need a comprehensive plan to distribute more affordable housing across the city and invest in the affordable housing units we have.
Thank you. Robert White, please.
Thank you. I worked on this issue recently with regional officials. We developed a very comprehensive housing report called The Future of Housing in Our Region. What the report examined is that over the next 10 years, if we don't build at least 320,000 new housing units in the region, not only can we not reduce the cost of housing, we can't even maintain the unaffordability rate that we have now. So I really like that the mayor has set a goal and is pursuing a housing goal, but we have to note that that goal is not ambitious enough. In fact, with that goal, housing costs continue to rise, which is something we cannot afford. In addition to that, I have pushed to really reimagine some of our older commercial office space where we have vacancy rates hovering around 14%, but virtually no residential vacancy rates. So we have to push forward with converting unused and underused office buildings in DC and around DC into affordable and workforce housing to ensure everyone has a place to live.
Thank you. Anne, please, your answer.
Yes, thank you. Well, I live right near the parks at Walter Reed, which is going up even as we speak. And it does have a range of affordable housing in that plan. 114 units are 30% AMI. And that's what we should be aiming for, is a lot of deeply affordable housing in Ward 4, Ward 3, and throughout the city as these new projects go up. And also there's a senior building there, which is great. But as Monica mentioned, we have to make sure that existing housing doesn't deteriorate and that landlords aren't able to sort of swoop in even under the current rent control law and raise rates. I have a lot of problems with the rent control amendments being proposed by Ms. Bonds. I don't think we should means test rent control. So there are a lot of issues there. And one other thing I want to mention is public housing. We need to preserve and make a safe and healthy the public housing we have. Otherwise, those residents are going to be out on the market needing affordable housing that could be available to others. Thank you.
Thank you. Marcus Goodwin, please.
I agree with the mayor's goal. I would like to see more affordable housing. However, I do know that we need to start to do the building more around our metro stations and along our largest avenues and thoroughfares. I want to be careful not to start to allow and change zoning for our exclusively residential communities, as some people have brought up before. I'm the most qualified candidate to deliver on the promise of affordable housing. In October of 2019, I finished working on a 55-unit, fully affordable senior housing project on Bladensburg Road Northeast in that Ward 5 community, which critically needed it. And I think that we can deliver those types of solutions legislatively from the council as a member of council at large. And finally, we need to start demanding more for the community when we're allowing these zoning exemptions, financing, or selling city properties. I have the experience to draft and introduce better community benefits agreements that help the communities get along, especially those that we're talking about this evening.
Okay, thank you. And our last answer to this question will come from Christina.
Thanks, Mark. I agree and do support the mayor's goal to have targeted or affordable housing in targeted areas of the city. I think when you look at sort of the history, you know, in 2018, of 1% of our affordable housing being in Ward 3, whereas in Ward 7 and 8, they were having 50% of our affordable housing. I think we have created modern day redlining when it comes to where we place our affordable housing in the city. And I feel like we really need to address and change our paradigm shift to push for more equity there. But I also agree with both Monica and Ann in terms of oftentimes in our affordable housing conversation, we are talking about new construction, which is super important, but we also need to talk about preservation. How do we preserve the affordable units that we already have? But also how do we push forward in terms of affordable home ownership? And so one of the things that I'm talking about in this campaign is the creation of a land trust, whereby seniors who are looking to downsize or others who want to move out of, you know, to smaller places can sell their homes to the trust and pass it on to another family so that they can experience affordability and home ownership as well. Thanks.
Thank you all. I wanted to apologize for my brief absence a few minutes ago. There was a feline emergency that needed to be attended to immediately. Our next question, we will start with Vincent Orange and work our way backward alphabetically. So if you are wondering, if you haven't already memorized the order in which your names fall, it's going to be Vincent Orange, Janae Lewis, Ed Lazier, Christina Henderson, Marcus Goodwin, Ann Wilcox, Robert White, and Monica Palacio. The question is, what are the most important changes that the district government should make based on the issues raised by the Black Lives Matter movement? Vincent?
Yes. Well, the most important issue is education, and it has really crystallized itself in COVID-19. The fact that 44% of our young people are not connected to the internet and don't have laptops, and the racial divide is just outrageous. And so we really need to make sure that our children have the opportunity to be able to read independently upon entering the 4th grade, and that they can add, subtract, multiply, and divide upon entering the 4th grade, because the curriculum changes. You're no longer reading to learn, you're learning to read. And if you can't add, subtract, multiply, and divide, I can't introduce you to decimals, fractions, and algebra in order for you to move on. And also, I know my time is running out, but we definitely need to address police brutality and the issues with affordable housing and the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on the Black and brown community.
Thank you. Janae, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I think the issue that's on the forefront of everyone's mind nationwide and certainly locally is community safety. And I think that it's the most important issue because it's not only being raised by the Black Lives Matter movement. I'm in conversation with young activists from Black Lives Matter. I'm also in conversation with seniors, in conversation with clergy, all of whom are concerned about community safety. And so I think the opportunity in this moment from movement leaders is for the entire city as a whole to reimagine what safety looks like for our community. And many of the other demands around equitable education, equitable access to healthcare, safe and healthy housing, all of these contribute to safer communities. But right now we have a commission on the council, which certainly is going to make some strong recommendations about reforming our police, but it doesn't deeply engage communities across the city in reimagining what safety looks like, because in order to be successful, we're all going to have to play a part and change our own habits, assumptions, and biases around what it takes to make that happen. So as council member, I would be committed to work with the Black Lives Matter movement and other leaders across the city who are concerned about community safety to reimagine that and put money and legislation behind making it happen.
Thank you. Ed Lazier.
I think we have to listen to Black Lives Matter for us to reimagine how we pursue public safety. You know, it was just 8 days ago that Deon Kay, an 18-year-old, was killed by a police officer in a vain or futile effort by the police to track down and get just a few guns off the street. A teenager in Southeast in Ward 8 losing his life as part of an effort to retrieve a few guns from the street is clearly a sign that we are doing our policing wrong. The incident happened where the police identified Deon Kay on social media, tracked him down. A police officer ran out of his car and shot Deon Kay within 5 seconds of getting out of the car. That was escalating the problem rather than de-escalating. I just imagine what would happen, and we know Deon Kay would be alive, if rather than an armed police officer chasing him down, we had a violence interrupter in the community talking to the youth, understanding why youth, Black and brown youth in poor communities carry guns, what's missing in their life, what we can do to support them and deal with them positively. And if we had done that, Deon would be alive today. I just think that is a shame, the way that we are approaching policing in the city.
Thank you. Christina Henderson, please.
Yes. So I think there are a number of issues that the Black Lives Matter movement has brought up. I think, I applaud the efforts of the council, particularly moving very quickly in terms of changing the body-worn cameras laws. But the other thing that we haven't really talked about is around stop and frisk and pretext stops around the city. I think for a lot of Black and brown young people, especially in this city, we spend an inordinate amount of time focusing on our dress and our clothes and how we walk and how we approach just to be considered law-abiding in this city, especially in particular areas of the town. And so I feel like we need to end stop and frisk. And I think that's part of reimagining the way we do policing in our city and in our communities. The other approach too is around policing in schools, getting police out of schools, removing the metal detectors that I've seen, kids in SpongeBob black backpacks being, patted down. And I feel like it's not creating a welcoming environment, but it's also showing very early on that we view you as criminals and not just as humans and citizens in our society.
Thank you, Christina. Marcus?
I believe in the words said by Mahatma Gandhi, poverty is the worst form of violence. In these dire economic times, we've all seen the numbers. The violent crime rate, especially gun crimes, are up 20% this year and on track to be the highest it's been in a decade. So I have a few ideas that will be my contribution to this conversation. First and foremost is funding after-school and mentoring programs. A lot of kids grew up like I did in the Columbia Heights or Congress Heights communities, can't visualize a better future for themselves. They don't have these structured, nurturing environments. That's why we need to start to invest in spaces where they have creative outlets and they can start to pursue their athletic and academic interests. The second is creating more vocational job training programs. We need our young people to have a steady income, but also to invest in themselves with skills and job training. They can be carpenters, plumbers, electricians, and they will be able to access more economic mobility and security. And finally, we start to make guns culturally unacceptable.
Thank you, Marcus. Ann Wilcox, you're next.
Okay, thank you. Obviously, the factors like education and job training are critical. Youth need something to do, young people, something positive. I would note that Deon had a mentor who has spoken out and he was working with him. And it's just so unfortunate, as Ed said, that this developed the way it did. And in fact, the officers who viewed them on Instagram knew Deon and they recognized them. So they went up there, unprepared, and things escalated very quickly. It was really a failure of policing. There's no doubt about that. And also, I want to mention that safe passage to and from school is critical for young people so that they feel safe going to school. And health and hunger is another critical aspect of building up our neighborhoods, making life more positive and more healthy for these young people. Thank you.
Robert White, you're next, please.
Thank you very much. There are three things that we have to do because this is the absolute most important moment in our history on racial justice since the 1960s civil rights movement. First, we have to reimagine policing. There is no reason why armed city employees have to have exclusive jurisdiction over people who turn right on red, or people who are having a mental health crisis in the street, or for public intoxication. That is not a public safety issue, and it can be addressed in a better way that is more equitable. Second, we have to treat the symptoms. People who commit crimes or make mistakes because of a trauma or mental health issues, when we throw them in prison, they don't get better, they don't recover. They only recover if we start to focus on rehabilitation instead of just punishment, and we become safer if we do that. Finally, we have to address unconscious bias. There's a reason why Deon K., who had a gun in a video, was killed the moment the police saw him. But Kyle Rittenhouse in Wisconsin killed 2 people, was armed, and was brought in without incident. And we have to address that difficult issue.
And our last answer to this question will be coming from Monica Palacio.
Thank you. So I want to share that I'm the first Latina to run for office in the District of Columbia. And that's very relevant because our communities and immigrant communities have never had elected representation in the city. And one of my very first jobs in 1992 and 1993 in the city was working with gang-involved youth and helping them understand that their lives had value, that they could have a future, that they could be part of a community that cared about them. And that is the #1 intervention for our youth that are already disconnected. So I think that has to be a core message. Treating violence as a public health issue is part of a continuum of responses. But I think the Black Lives Matter movement is also sending us a clear message. We can no longer tolerate and negotiate with racism and white supremacy. And a lot of traditional law enforcement systems are premised on the unconscious bias that anytime you see a Black and brown citizen, you know, they're doing something bad. So we need a transformation in the culture of law enforcement and emergency response systems.
Thank you. Thank you all. I bring it back to Robert Gordon, who will ask our next question of the candidates.
I see that we're running up against the outside time limit of close to 6 o'clock. So this is going to be a very specific question regarding Ward 3. You don't have to take the full minute. And I'm going to start with Marcus Goodwin. The approved budget for FY 2021 includes funding for 2 new schools in Ward 3. The old Hardy School that will be a new Foxhall Elementary School, and the former Georgetown Day School facility on MacArthur Boulevard. Do you support funding for these schools, or should we use the money elsewhere?
I think we need to have a thoughtful, nuanced approach because Ward 3 already has the most elementary school students of any ward in the district. So I would like us to think more intuitively about where we could spend these funds and if it is better spent to ensure that we're expanding access to proper investment in neighborhood schools across the district. While the city is small and people can go to school in any of the 8 wards reasonably in terms of their commute, I would like for people to have neighborhood schools that have proper investment. And that means that I would likely like to look at FY 2021 allocation of renovation of these 2 campuses and see if it isn't better spent in helping our more dire and direct needs.
Thank you. Christina?
Yeah, so when I was a staffer at the council, I worked on the PACE Act, which whole purpose was around infusing demand and equity into our school modernization process. Obviously, I've heard a lot from families in the Ward 3 community in terms of the overcrowding that's happening, particularly in the early ages, and the ability and our need as a city to desire to have more slots for early learning, particularly in the pre-K. I think a lot of us were sort of caught off guard in terms of the purchase of the old Hardy School, and so that's something that I feel like we should look at, but I certainly support the development of the new school on Foxhall. Thank you.
Thank you. Ed Lazier?
Great, thanks. So we know that Ward 3 schools are bursting at the seams and we need more capacity. I am deeply frustrated that Mayor Bowser did not follow the wish of the community and return the Hardy School from the lab school back to being a DC public school so that any new funding could have been used to renovate other schools like Stoddard and Key. My understanding is that the mayor's funding a brand new school while leaving the lab school in the Hardy building and took capital money away from other Ward 3 schools that needed funding to build this new school that wasn't needed. I just think it's a wrong-headed approach. I think it's the wrong way to spend the city's money. If it's a public property, which Hardy School is, we should be able to reclaim it and use it for our residents so that our capital budget in our schools can be used as wisely as possible. I do want to also say I have a 6 o'clock obligation, so I either won't be able to do a closing statement or I could do it now if you wanted me to, but I'm also happy just to hop off.
We'll catch you another time for your closing statement.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Janae Lewis?
Thank you. So as a person who went to high school in that neighborhood, I know it well. And I think that given the crisis that we're in right now in COVID-19 and that for the foreseeable future, our school students, our public school students and charter school students are learning from home. I do think that it was a misstep to fund the renovation of these schools in this fiscal year's budget. Because I think that we have students across the city who struggle to have devices, who struggle to have access to Wi-Fi and internet. They don't have the support in their homes from parents or others who can help them use those devices for proper learning. And then other schools in the city have been underfunded for years. And so they already were behind in having the infrastructure to weather this crisis. So while I do think the renovation is important and necessary, given that this budget was passed and we were very clear about the level of crisis that we're in and some of the technological needs that we have across the city, I don't think that it was a wise decision to fund the renovation right now.
Vincent Orange.
Yeah, I would say I don't think now is the time to second guess the mayor. The budget is balanced for 2020, which ends on September 30th. Fiscal year 21 will begin on October 1. By the time we take office on January 2nd, we'll be 4 months into 2021. And so we'll be looking at the budget 2022. And I think that's where the focus should be on. I want to deal with things that are certainly going to be under my control and what I have an impact on. So I will say that the fact that the mayor was able to budget fiscal year 2020 and fiscal year 2021 without raising taxes and allowing us to move forward. But the key right now is, unlike others are saying, let's spend the rainy day fund. You can't spend what you don't have. There's only $149 million in that fund. And that can go in a blink. Just the way our $1.8 billion was gone in basically 2 weeks when we found out COVID-19 was here. So I'm not gonna, just make political hay just to make it. I think that we should continue to move forward and get the best minds down at that council to address what's happening now.
Thank you. Monica?
Yes, I've spoken to school leaders quite a bit over the last few years, charter school leaders and DCPS leaders. And I think what happened in Ward 3 is a symptom of a lack of better comprehensive planning across the city that balances the needs of all communities. I don't want to punish one community in order to take the resources we need for another community, but let's face it, we have an achievement gap that is caused by chronic underfunding, by schools that aren't getting the investments they need, by a per pupil funding formula that hasn't kept up with the growth of communities and the needs of students in those communities. So we need a broader vision for better, more aggressive, comprehensive planning, and gets the resources to the schools and keeps those resources in those schools for those students who have special needs, who need trauma-informed services, who need access to healthcare. But if a student leaves that school, we need a solution for that problem as well.
Thank you. Robert White?
Thank you. I want to say the lab school is an incredible school. However, they are in a public building that we now need desperately because of significant overcrowding in our Ward 3 schools that educate not just Ward 3 students, but a significant number of students from across the city. With respect to the old Georgetown school site, that was something that we didn't see coming, but a shiny new school was put up for sale at a cost so much less than what we could build it for. And frankly, we already have it in our plan that we needed to build a school in that area. So it didn't make sense. It wasn't convenient, but it did make sense for us to pass up this opportunity. It would have been foolish of us and cost us a lot more. But what we all need to be conscious of as a citywide representative, and one of my colleagues on this panel or another panel will be also a citywide representative, we need to be careful not to pit communities against each other, but to do our best to push the entire city forward and lift up the entire city together.
Thank you. And finally, Ann Wilcox.
Yes, thank you. Yes, as we've said, this entire COVID situation is going to be a balancing of priorities. And I agree that, there should be some repairs in the Ward 3 area. I think it is important to eventually build the new school at Foxhall and to pick up on the opportunity of the Georgetown Day School site. But over in Ward 8, there's a couple of schools. If I'm thinking, I think it's Malcolm X School that's been asking for repairs for a long time. And Trayon White has started to speak out and say, hey, what about us? What about our schools in Ward 8? So we definitely have to balance what little money we have and spread it out as much as possible.
Well, thank you all for that. Mark, we have one final question, but I'm wondering whether, given that it's after 6 o'clock, that we just move into the final statements. I know everybody has things to do.
And the women have a prior commitment tonight. DC Women in Politics starts soon.
Okay.
Okay. So Randy, if you could set the timer to 30 seconds for closing statements. Tick, 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 tick.
Mark, you call out the order.
And we will go backwards from Ann Wilcox all the way back to Marcus Goodwin. So Ann, if you are ready, have at it.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I'm Ann Wilcox. As I said, I'm a lawyer, former school board member, been in DC since the 1980s, and always a proponent of statehood, first and foremost. The Statehood Green Party stands for progressive policies, statehood, affordable housing, public education, and all the rest. And I would bring my legal skills and my government background in those areas if I was elected. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Robert White.
Thank you for hosting. Thank you to everyone who joined. I'm at-large council member Robert White. I'm asking for your vote for a second term. The issues that we deal with and the issues that we have in front of us are not theoretical to me. The issues that me and my family face every day, and this is a job, and these are issues that I take very seriously, I take personally. I work harder every day to be better for the residents who put me into office, to show up for them, and that's what I will continue doing. You get 2 at-large votes, and I'm asking for 1 of them. You can contact my campaign at robertwhite4fordc.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Monica Palacio.
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, I'm an immigrant to the United States. I'm the first Latina to run for DC Council. We've never had an elected representative that's either an immigrant or Latina in the city. We are way overdue. And I've found that a lot of solidarity across the city in believing that our time has come to have a fair and accurate representation of our experiences in the city. You can find out more about me, monicafordc.com, and Monica for DC on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
Thank you, Monica. Vincent Orange.
Well, thank you very much for a very well-run forum. I am running to provide mature, experienced leadership, institutional knowledge, and sound judgment to plan and execute the successful comeback of the District of Columbia for the benefit and general welfare of its citizens. The district government is in trouble. The district government is broke, and we must jumpstart this economy so we can have the appropriate funding to address other needs. But we must come together the same way we did when we had the control board in the late 90s, early 2000s. We need a prescription for success. We must execute, and we must make sure at the end of the day that we're doing this in the best interest and for the best welfare of our citizens. Thank you so much for having me and providing this opportunity to be with you.
Thank you, Vincent. Janae Lewis, you're next.
Thank you. Again, I'm Janae Lewis. My website is janaelewisatlarge.com, and DC is my home. We are in an unprecedented time, and we know that when we face crisis moments in our home, we don't start from a place of leaving folks behind. We always center the people in our families and in our communities and try to make it work. So this is our home, our vision, and our time to do the same. Expect the same from our government and our elected officials, and I commit to make decisions on the council that center all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Janae. Christina Henderson.
Hi, I'm Christina Henderson, and I'm asking for 1 of your 2 votes this fall. I feel like COVID-19 and the unprecedented global pandemic has shown the need for us to have council members who have a common sense approach to policy making, embrace collaboration, and an abiding commitment to equity. And that is my brand of leadership. That is my kind of leadership. My website is christinahenderson.org. You can go there and find out more information about how you can get involved with this campaign. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. And last, we'll hear from Marcus Goodwin.
Thank you all for putting on this forum. My name is Marcus Goodwin, and I'm running to ensure that we have a stronger, more equitable economy coming out of COVID-19. Now, I'm the only candidate who hasn't spent their entire career in politics and/or lobbying. I'm running to put people over politics. I'm gonna fight for practical solutions to address the real problems facing residents. It's time for new ideas and new leadership on the council. It's time for a good win for DC. I hope that you'll learn more at my website, goodwinfordc.com, or by our social media, GOODWINFORDC. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Marcus. Thank you, all of you. To think we have only 2 votes, and we still have 16 other candidates to hear from before the month is out. Thank you all for participating. Thank you all for attending. We've got another one of these at 8 p.m. with 8 additional candidates. Yes, say goodbye. And we will let you know via listserv and other social media once this is posted on YouTube. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.